We're live.
We're live.
We're live. It says live. I'm waiting to get the feed here. And we're live. Hello, everybody. My name is Mauricio Palacio, and together here with my co-host Victoria, we're very excited to welcome you to the very first edition of Get Together, an online event brought to you by Eventtia. For the last 3 months, it's been very challenging, and all of the events where we usually used to meet have been canceled, and we had to move into online interactions. This is why we decided to build a space for meaningful conversations, a place where we can get together, share our knowledge, talk about digital marketing and events, and connect with like-minded people. And by like-minded people, I mean you, our viewers, our audience. Thank you so much for being here today. We're really happy to share this moment with you. So you see on the right of the screen, you have the program, but you have a tab with the chat. So please let us know where you're joining from. Which country are you from? Is it the afternoon? Is it the morning? We want to know where you're joining from. So please leave your comments. There's also a section where you can ask your questions. So at the end, we'll take some time to select some of these questions that we can talk with our special guest, Nick Borelli. So I also wanted to say that this event is available in Spanish, so we're having a simultaneous translation. There's a Seguir en Español on the left of the screen, so you click on the start, you will have a link, and it will allow you to follow the content in Spanish. So why Get Together? Get Together was born out the need of building connections in these types of crises. And we're using this time of challenge as an opportunity for innovation. We at Eventtia, we believe that online events are the future of digital marketing. Why? Because there's nothing more powerful than events to nurture and build communities. And we know that as businesses, our communities are our biggest assets. The problem with physical events that we love is that they have high costs, they're less scalable, and actually today they have high risks. We must not forget that today we can still not travel, and actually in many places we cannot really meet freely. However, by using a platform like this one, we can launch many events and we can reach a very large audience and we can break borders. I'm seeing the comments here with people running from Costa Rica, from Germany, from London, from Colombia. So I'm very glad to see all these messages, and I'm very glad to see that we're connecting from people from all around the world. So online events allow us to get creative, come up with unique experiences. Today, at the end, we also have a cultural and entertainment experience. We'll discover that in a moment. So that's what we're doing here in Get Together. Welcome again. And I want to introduce you to my co-host, Victoria. Victoria, where are you connecting from?
Hey, Mauricio, everyone from sunny Greece. Isn't it exciting that all of us can connect from anywhere in the world to share this great online experience? I mean, today we're connecting from Greece, France, Spain, United States, to bring to you this very first edition of Get Together. How exciting is that? So I guess I'll be introducing the topic and then our guest, and we'll kick off this event. So today we'll be talking about something unique, and that's design thinking. And although we'll discuss this topic applied to online events, it's important to highlight that you can also apply design thinking to improve your life. Design thinking is a very powerful idea, empowering people all around the world to take ownership of their actions and achieve fulfillment through design and experimentation. In other words, with design thinking, you can improve every single aspect of your personal or professional life, events included. And that's something we'll be discussing with today's guest, Nick Borelli. I remember discovering Nick while researching for the events industry influencers, and believe me, I've read dozens of list articles, only to discover that Nick's name was on every single list. Nick Borelli has been in the event industry since he was, listen carefully, 14 years old. He specializes in digital marketing strategies through consulting, coaching, and brand communication management for events and event companies. He's also an international speaker, focused on discussing the latest event industry trends. Well, international. I mean, last year he told us that he was in Estonia, traveling, giving speeches, but considering the nowadays situation, he's connecting with us online. Also, he's been awarded as one of the most influential event professionals on social media in North America. Nick, we're very happy to have you here. Thank you for accepting our invitation.
Yeah, thanks. And I heard all of these amazing countries that I normally get to visit in person, and there was a bit of a sting of it, but the sting has been somewhat resolved by at least knowing that there's some kind of connectivity in this time where many of us feel, disconnected. But I do miss those beaches, so I don't know. I'll need to figure that out eventually. But
yeah, that's
I'm happy
problem.
to be here.
Yeah. Thank you very much. So, to kick off our conversation, let me ask you a burning question most people in industry have. We're living very challenging times. We were used, as you said, getting together at physical events, interacting face-to-face, enjoying in-person experiences. Nowadays, however, we're stuck in our houses. I mean, that's the reality because of the crisis we're still experiencing, unfortunately. And we see ourselves forced to transition from physical events to online events. So we were very curious to know what's your take on that transition and where do you think it will lead us?
Yeah, I mean, these opportunities for these types of virtual events have been pretty sustainably available for a decade now. The fact that they haven't been mass adopted, specifically in the idea of hybrid events, as an additional opportunity to reach people and to make community stronger by reaching out to a more diverse group of people. The reason that I think they haven't been mass adopted prior to this is that there was comfort in face-to-face. We knew what it was. Many of us are in the world of tactile and take things for granted. We know face-to-face works. We were just getting to the point where we were moving towards proving it empirically in as many different ways as possible, including things like combining RFID technology and biometric technology to tell you where people are at an event at face-to-face and how they were feeling. I mean, we were on that road. And then, there was a massive disruption that kind of gave us this pause. The reason that people use the word almost interchangeably, opportunity and challenge, is because they really are that. So I want to first recognize the fact that myself and many people who primarily work in the face-to-face industries, we are in a point of pain, and this is not the best way to grow, in as much as, no one likes pain. That said, there is no evolution without adversity, in any model that you can look at. So this is the adversity, and we can choose to have it crush us and be one of the many animals that didn't continue to evolve, or we can be one that does and embrace this virtual as, number one, an opportunity to go outside of our comfort zone, potentially for many of us, and gain some new skills and come out of it, no matter what it looks like on the other side, with new muscles. I was saying it recently, it was akin to, imagine someone, and I'm not the person to make this analogy, but I'm going to try it anyway, who did a lot of upper body workouts, for years and years, but neglected the legs, right? Mm-hmm. You've seen those people. So now we have the opportunity to have a number of leg days in a row to build up some leg muscles. So when we come out of this, we'll have a healthy upper body and a healthy lower body, or you want to say mental health and physical health. However you want to look at that analogy, we have new sets of skills that we can learn in this period of time because there is a valid excuse to do that. And anyone in the face-to-face industry knows that the idea of duty of care comes before we get to do anything else. So we can't put our attendees in physical harm. And because of that, we're going to learn these new things. But the outcome, I think, will be a more well-rounded experienced design professional who will look at all the tools because they've had some training on one that they may have not adopted in the past 10 years.
Nick, this has definitely been a leap into 10 or 20 years into the future that has been forced into us in the lapse of 3 months. It's been a shock, a pause. And right now, as we were talking before, this is a moment of adaptation, innovation, and renewal. And so that takes me to this main subject of today, which is design thinking. And design thinking is like a buzzword that the people used to use. It's really a very trendy term, but when you look closer to it, it's definitely a very powerful tool that can be applied in business, but in personal life as well. And I was wondering, to get started, could you tell us what is design thinking and what is it so popular and so important today?
Yeah, I mean, design thinking really gripped the product world first, I think. Just because they oftentimes have the most amount of budget and the most amount of resources, and then it kind of trickled down into everything else. Mostly because it's incredibly flexible, and it kind of just takes advantage of a shift in how things are made, and things are produced and things are designed now, where in the past a lot of times products, experiences, and things like that were designed to maybe features and benefits. The idea was, let's make it a little bit better. Let's have this a screwdriver, but like this one has, it's boy, I don't know anything about screwdrivers. I'm picking things I don't know about. That has a little bit of, maybe it's a Swiss Army knife, right? It adds another thing, right? It's not new. It's not changing the world. It's just two more things. Design thinking stops everything that has happened up until this point. It goes backwards and starts at the very beginning and asks really simple questions. The kind of questions as a parent I get all the time from my kids of, kind of like the why. Why do we do this? Why? Why? And they ask why a lot of times, which actually is a principle oftentimes utilized in design thinking. But really, it's just a set of tools to help you solve human-centric problems in a creative way. And one of the unique aspects of it is it oftentimes utilizes end-to-end users to help you co-create. So I say end-to-end users specifically in the events industry, because I think oftentimes we think of our clients, or we think of let's say our stakeholders, sponsors, et cetera, as our users, so to speak. But the reality is that we design experiences in order to create behavioral change. So the end-to-end user is the person who's having their behaviors changed. So the attendee. Everything else is a byproduct of that, and you can build that into it, as far as people's customer lifetime value, or the kind of insight exhaust that you get from the attendees. But the attendee change is really at the very center of it. So it's human at the center. And it's just 5 steps. And we'll get into the the nitty gritty of it. But to give you a preview, it's you empathize, you define, you ideate, you prototype, and test. I would say that event professionals historically are good at some of those things and are weaker at others, and don't fully get out of things for reasons I can get into. Certain aspects of it that they think they do, but they don't actually do well. And it really all comes down to the fact that humans are problem solvers. This is what makes us different. Creativity is what separated us from animals. I also think that in the future, it's going to be really more so as defined of what separates us from machines. Machine learning. A lot of, like, I've looked at AI for the last decade quite a bit as far as what it can do, and where it's really has taken no leaps is the idea of creativity, of going from one place to a completely disparate place. Like, I spontaneously was in a conversation on Facebook earlier today about, I know this is going to be crazy. I'm going to connect these dots, and a machine wouldn't do that. So a friend of I said, I think this period of change has a symbiotic relationship potentially with something that we're experiencing globally, but certainly in the United States as well, with Black Lives Matter. The pause of experienced designers on being able to create a lot of face-to-face events has given birth to this less noise, which has had this opportunity for this movement to gain more ground faster, I believe. Even things like sports are gone, right? So there's less to occupy our time in short news cycles. So experienced designers not being able to do a lot of the work that they've done has given this opportunity for this movement to, I think, accelerate. And the other side of it, I think, the experienced designers have the ability to look at this movement and deconstruct it, to take lessons from it for future experienced design, to say things like when we were talking about events and their potential of creating change in a person, actually one step further is creating change agents, and movements do that better, I think, than the designed events historically do. So we can I think help them by not that it's really our choice, but giving that movement an opportunity to blossom. We could also learn from it this way. And a friend of mine said, well, that's an interesting insight. However, they're not the same thing. And I was like, they aren't the same thing. But like, this is where I get a little pretentious. Like Leonardo da Vinci, he did this like codex on birds, about how birds fly. He wasn't trying to build a bird. He was trying to understand flight. And he went in a disparate place. So animals don't make these kinds of jumps in thought that I had. Machines don't make these kinds of jumps in thoughts I have. But when you start at nothing, when you start, with just inspiration and taking things in, you can make huge jumps in ideas because you get out of the way and you're open to all of this types of inspiration for massive creativity. And the economy that we will have in the future, when things are automated more and more, will be an economy of creativity. And really, design thinking is a really amazing basis for creativity.
Yeah, and you are mentioning experienced designers, but actually this is what we do at events. We are designing experiences, and the crazy thing is that design thinking is such a wide concept that we can apply to everything. I remember I discovered this concept a few years ago, applied to leadership and to professional skills. So I was wondering, when was your first moment of interaction with this concept? When did you apply it for the first time? Or when did you realize how powerful it is?
Yeah, there was a couple different awakenings for me that kind of put this together for me. I started really young, at like age 14. I had a hobby that I was actually starting to make some money on, but my parents also said I had to get a job because the hobby I had was web design, and they were pretty certain in the mid 90s that was going to be a fad. So, the internet. So they said, you gotta get a real job. We can get you in this hospitality group that my dad's company had their picnics at. So you're gonna wash dishes, and you're gonna watch parties and whatever. So I was doing these two parallel things. I was building websites, and I was watching people interact. And then I started to see, this kind of connection. So in the web design world, we were doing things because we could. Once we got a new language that allowed us to have frames, we all had frames just because you could. And design went along those lines, right? So I was designing sites basically on fads and copying. And not innovating, but just we had the tools, so we used them. Meanwhile, in events, same idea. Once we had something, we did it. We just bolted it on, and they got gaudy, and they got fluff, and they got to the point where some of the events I worked on, like, they just knew, look, we had a good year. We spent a lot of money on events. If we spend more money on this event, we'll have a better year. No data. There wasn't apparatus to do that. And then 2008 hit. With a big economic downturn. And then people started looking at ROI. They started looking at drawing straight lines to things and spending. And then they said, let's just do the things that make sense. And I was doing, at that point, freelance web design for trade shows, in addition to being a marketing director for a number of different event organizations. And I can tell you, in both of those worlds, people were like, if you can draw a straight line to revenue and change, we'll do it, but the fluff is gone. So then it became down to the point of, like, you had to test everything, and you had to be able to show your worth. And for me, it was like, all right, what's a system that allows me to gauge what I believe to be true against the reality in a way that I could empirically prove and get more money for. So I, discovered this along those lines. And at the same time, on the macro level, the experience design industries were going from this transition of planning events to designing events. And you started seeing the word experiential quite a bit more. And it was more about trust acceleration and emotion. And these words started to come into play, where before it was about execution. It was about hitting your marks. It was about this happens, then this and this, etc. And I was experiencing all that. I was trying in marketing to avoid a race to the bottom, which means I had to delineate the work in a different way. And that meant really stressing the intangibles. I started working with associations in the live events industry and got really involved in the idea of elevating what we do. That was a big part of it too, of like the words we use matter. And that's why I don't say, often I rarely say event planner. I say experience designer, because I think that the words matter and elevation matters and raising things matter. So I was starting to look at the intangibles of things like experience and time and innovation as things that we offer as one organization over another, and then consistency. And the consistency of innovation is really where I had to try to pick an apparatus that would have results that could be kind of proven. And that's really where design thinking, I think, became a staple. And what I, offer is the idea of consistently can create innovative ideas, because I have a system that it doesn't just fall, happenstance. So I started getting into people watching and social listening, and deep into the world of event data analysis. And all of those things culminated in this kind of viewpoint I have now of events, of what they can be. And they're not limited to face-to-face. The virtual event is as much as I worked in the way of communicating and connecting people on web design, as I worked in the face-to-face industries in parallel, I realized it's all the same thing. There's strengths on one and weaknesses on the other. I think they complement each other extremely well in the world of hybrid. But I don't think, like a lot of face-to-face event professionals, that virtual events are inferior to face-to-face. I don't at all. Like, I think they're different.
And Nick, so I understand from everything that you say that instead of planning events, we need to design them. And I get that from design thinking, it's putting the human in the middle. And probably what makes the human difference to the machines are the emotions. And that's why we also talk about the experiences. So we have an audience of event planners, of marketers today. We're living this transition into online events. How can we apply design thinking to this very context of online events?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you have to be inspired by outside of what's happening right now. Before we went live, we had a really cool conversation around where we are, in the mindset of, or in the history of, like, let's say, virtual events. And I think we're very much in the beta stage right now. Even though the technology has existed for quite some time, basically, I think that was mostly just infrastructure and technology building. We haven't really mass adopted. So now that we've had to mass adopt, from the design point of view, we're in the beta stage, which means that we are kind of doing it to do it, just like I said with websites, and social media went through that phase too, early on, of like, well, why are you on Facebook? Because everyone's on Facebook. What are you doing? I'm basically aping everybody else. People didn't find their voice. They didn't embrace things like storytelling and things like that until much later. They were doing to doing. They were copying. And I think that we're mostly in that stage right now when it comes to virtual. So for me, I'm looking outside of the traditional virtual event space and looking at broadcast and production and things like that to determine what's the secret sauce that makes certain things exciting. So I think that it's So one of my favorite examples of like the best when it comes to virtual events is for inspiration is the Olympics. So
Absolutely.
go with me on this one. How exciting to you objectively is the idea of a rock on ice and then someone sweeping around it? You know, objectively, there's not a lot of excitement built into that. You know, it's not people hitting people or precision or archery or guns. Like it's a broom and a rock. And yet every 4 years that's telecast and the world watches things like that, right? And there's a bunch of different reasons why, but I will say if you deconstruct why that holds people's attention is that in that space they say, okay, if you were there face to face, there'd be a certain energy around it that you probably would take advantage of and you might get caught up in it. But if you're not, you're even one step removed. It's simply a screen, ice on the other side of it, and a broom and a rock. There's nothing there. There's nothing exciting. So what they do is they add an element of storytelling and emotional play that takes place. So they'll have someone start sweeping and they'll say, now let's go back to when, Nancy was 6 years old and, she was sweeping around the house. I'm making this up. She got really into this and her uncle said, what my grandfather did this sport, whatever. They build in some humanness, some emotional plays, and then she hurt her arm and she thought she could never do it. So there's a character arc. And they build all that in, and then they go, so that's how, she got to be where she is now. Now let's go back onto the ice. Now you've got stake in it. Now you're interested. Now you're compelled to say, is she going to do it? Is she going to realize this dream of sweeping ice? So it's called curling. I don't know how familiar people are with it. Yeah. I just think of like the most objectively obscure sport, to me at least. So all of that stuff is aided by the ability to design it in your head and say, what does this look like as a character arc? Who's the antagonist? Who's the protagonist? What's the resolution potentially? How do you get people emotionally have stake in it? And I'm telling you, virtual does that better than face-to-face. Face-to-face might have smells and other sensory input that you get that's around you that the virtual can't compete with. But virtual has the ability to have it orchestrated in a way where you design the emotional pools. So for me, it's the excitement comes from, okay, what can we do better in virtual that we can't do in face-to-face, as opposed to a lot of the mentality right now, I think, when I see things is, how do we, do a halfway decent job of doing the thing we wanted to do in face-to-face in virtual? Let's scrap all that. Let's have things in the background that make someone say, what is that back there? Not that I have complete chaos of toys and stuff behind me, but imagine that, where you're pulled into their life and they can pull things in. There's all these things that are different emotionally. So that's the thing that I would say right now of like what design thinking can do is to say, what is the person feeling on the other side of a virtual event? And that is a disconnection, isolation, and not an emotional hook because the sensory input isn't there. Great. How can you do that in other ways? Why do people cry in commercials that you watch a story of? Like, you do that more likely than you would in face-to-face, because you are isolated, because you can experience these things fully without having to keep up appearances, right? So you have to really, the first part of design thinking is empathize. You have to really understand what that person is going through while consuming this screen.
It sounds much more powerful in terms of storytelling. I mean, it's basically storytelling with design thinking, and design thinking empowering the storytelling process.
Absolutely. I'm feeling that there's a confluence of different things here. One, we're talking about the scenarization or scripts of stories, and it makes me think a lot about the movies, which are probably some of the best creative productions to produce feelings, make you cry, make you laugh. And these physical events are moving to video, which is taking us closer to this scenarization. So I'm wondering, Nick, if we're going into a future of events where we'll be closer to a Netflix than to the typical venues?
I've been thinking along those lines too, and thinking along the lines of what are the different types of mediums that exist out there that are taking people's attention in digital ways that are doing it really, really well. And that's not traditional B2B online events. I'm not going there for inspiration. So like the idea of like storytelling was one example of something, the Olympics, of taking something that someone's like, well, I have a dental conference that's 4 days and I have, 200 speakers and I've got to get people excited about that to sit in their office and, consume 10 hours of content per day for that. I mean, like that's, again, I think that's as boring objectively as ice and a stone and a sweeping. However, there is ways to do it if you play on the emotion. And so I look at that. I look at video game streamers. So that is, if you would have told me 25 years ago that as somebody who grew up with like an NES and like had an Atari, that people would want to watch other people do it by the like thousands and millions of watching other people do it, right? Not playing it. You're like, the video game really, like, its main pool is that you control the character, right? It's what makes it different. But imagine for some reason, people are like, no, I want to watch someone else control the character. It's back to that, viewpoint, that vantage point of fly on the wall. But if you look at it deeper, what you found is someone who's created community, who has engaged people in a way that is empathetically connected. They're like me. Like my 6-year-old has this guy, Preston, who he loves, who plays Minecraft, and he will watch that over any narrative, a cartoon or whatever. He would much prefer watching him play Minecraft, even more than playing Minecraft. And that is a virtual event, like that is, a live opportunity to follow someone who is narrating something. And there's something in that is special that we can, I think, learn from. Dating apps, another opportunity where people are saying, well, yes, that's all well and good for content, but there's no ability really to use virtual as a way to connect people, to make meaningful networking, right? And I'm like, well, people have been getting married off of that. So like, if you can't find a sale, on virtual from somebody who wants to buy what you're buying and you selling it, that's a lot easier, I think, personally, than finding someone to get married to. And the apps have figured out a way to make that, a system, using psychographics, using connections beyond just the biographic information. They're not putting 50-year-olds with 50-year-olds. They're putting people with similar values together with people with similar values. So there's another source of inspiration that we can take. And even entertainment, like you were mentioning Netflix, but like think about like the possibilities of even this conversation afterwards. We could have a DVD commentary style thing under it where a narrator would pause this and say, that reminds me of this and that and this. You could spin this and turn this into 3 different pieces depending on the commentary of the people who would do that. Or a debate, someone would come into this. And you see this on YouTube quite a bit, where it would pause and someone say, this guy's full of nonsense. Like, he doesn't know anything what he's talking about. This isn't design thinking. This is great. And then that's another perspective, right? Like, that's a new way to challenge ideas. But you can do that in this medium a lot easier than someone in face-to-face raising their hand and saying, this is BS. I don't want to, and disrupting it, right? Like, you have the ability to pause and move around. Even extra features of like, what if we had like the conversation that we had before we went live, and like that was an extra feature that people could have afterwards, a little bit less produced, a little bit more organic, right? It could be a bonus feature. So all of these different like storytelling and other medias that exist, that like you said with the Netflix, of like, would people binge a conference or would they prefer to watch it over a period of time? You can't spread out a period of time for face-to-face. It's one of the weakest parts of face-to-face, I think, as I've examined immediately of all my peers going like, great, we have to work in virtual now. I hate this. I'm like, well, let's step back and say, let's empathize and let's, start from scratch and say, well, maybe we can start doing things that we could never do in face-to-face. Like, what if we get excited about the things that are different? And for me, like, the most exciting is when I have to fly to a city for 3 days and do 9 hours of content and then an event at night and sleep for 4 hours and do it again and do it again and do it again and fly home. The amount of information I get that sticks, that I use in my life is so small in comparison to what I one ear out the other ear because I was, hungover or whatever else, because I get the full, effect of the live events. All that stuff, like, it doesn't wash on. Now imagine the virtual event, which is a conference over 10 days, and it's 2 hours a day. And the design of it would be, you're going to learn something today and you're going to use it today in the life that you live today. So if it was like a well-being thing, you would adopt the well-being principles. Today, your homework is to use the thing you learned in your life and come back to us tomorrow, and we're going to talk about how you did it. That stuck, and you can't do it in face-to-face. You don't get to fly home that day.
And I feel, Nick, that one of the biggest caveats that we have right now with this transition to virtual events is that we are trying so hard to reproduce online what we do face-to-face. And we're trying to do the same schemes, the same program, the same timings, or actually this is the opportunity to totally deconstruct what an event is and transform it with the potential of what the internet, what the web, and what the digital formats allow us to do.
The deconstruction would not have happened without a catalyst of complete disruption. So I think we were on a track for really, it was fun. We could see it. It was comfortable, but it was still iterative. Like, you were starting to see mostly the stories about the event industry about acquisitions and not about giant new ideas coming off. Like, I can see that, in the chat, that James Morgan is listening to this, who's a friend of mine in London.
It's a friend of mine as well. So
yeah.
Hello, James. Thanks.
One of the best minds in our field for sure. And when you mentioned Estonia, like, that's who I was hanging out with last year there. But he had this idea that really was, and it is this really cool idea of that is around the idea of design thinking. That is something that event professionals have had friction around, and that's the idea of co-authorship of design, which is a big part of human-centric design, is to actually engage human beings and not be in this kind of thing where event professionals, I think that one of the biggest failings of experienced designers is the fact that they know so much that they kind of are in a bubble of that. They have to know so much. They have to know about a style of chairs and linen colors, egress, behavioral change, banquet event orders, food allergies, fire safety, kerning, bleed, drape lines. Like, that's absurd how much stuff they have to know, and they know a lot. And because they know a lot, they don't embrace their ignorance and their humility enough to actually just ask people what they want, right? And listen as deep as they could and empathize with their situation. So James has this idea of like this platform that allows people to kind of like upvote, a Reddit style, the different aspects of an event in order to have a voice in the design room of the attendee, of the would-be attendee. Everything from, it could be, the speakers of what keynote speakers do you want, to what style chicken do you want for lunch. All of that stuff is possible. It was really cool. It is really cool. But it was one of those things where I think now people will pay attention to it because they're willing to, more so, or at least as much as they should have initially, because people have decided, or people know now that like the ground isn't firm. So if it's kind of like innovate or die. So that's the one thing that's good about this period of time, is that if you're in that kind of mindset, you're kind of set. But yeah, the co-authorship part is such a huge element of design thinking, of instead of creating things in a vacuum because you know it better. And that's how people get to these events where they're like, yeah, we're just going to basically cut and paste. We did it last year. I worked on this annual dinner. It was the 129th annual dinner for this trade commission for the city. And I was like saying, okay, now why are we having this event? And they're like, because we've had 128 other ones and it's another year. And I'm like, that's not a good reason. Like, I'm going to say right now, maybe prove to me you should have this event. Tell me why this event needs to happen. And oftentimes we call that an organizing principle. So that takes the idea of what is the state of the world right now, the state of this community right now that we are serving with this event. Where are they at? What do they need? What don't they have? And where's the intersection of our mission and their needs? And if you really pay attention to their needs, and you could do things as and I think you should anyway, but things like personas where you do your best to like put this stuff together. I do personas where I actually have physical people who are avatars of the personas be part of the design process as well. So once I've defined the types of people, I go out and find them. And I create like advisory councils for events and focus groups where we bring them in a room and we say, you're this kind of person, you're that kind of person, but behavior based, not biographical information. But I want a devil's advocate and a cynic and a risk taker and a traditionalist. I want them in the room so I can bounce ideas off them. And if one person says I hate that, but one says I love that, then I can design, okay, it might stay, but it might not be for everyone. But I do like the idea that we can create different parts of the journey for different people. And I think that like that's part of the design thinking that is really important is that you're not creating like just one thing in a bubble. You're creating multiple paths to elate these different groups of people in a way that feels more true and cuts through the noise. You ever been in a room where someone says like a very niche thing that you know about and you can hear it really far away? Like if someone were to say, like, I'm into comic books, there's a lot of nonsense behind me around that stuff. So if someone were to say, in a bar down at the corner, Batman, that wouldn't kick in because like everybody knows about Batman. But if someone were to say like, Jason Todd, and I either know Batman or not, who is one of the Robins, but only for a few years, like niche, I would hear that really far away because they're in a tighter ring of the circle, right? So I would know, like, from a standpoint of like, not only am I someone speaking my very specific dialect, I would click in and be like, you're from there in Greece, not just someone in Greece, but you're from this corner of it. And like, and then we would connect. And I think that like knowing people like that, knowing the words they use and the insider lingo and that kind of thing allows you to kind of, design better because you're a native, you're immersed.
Yeah, and going back to the co-creation thing, it's something extremely powerful. I remember a few years ago, I witnessed a speaker co-creating his speech with attendees. He presented a list of topics associated with songs, and he started to play the songs, and he's saying the song that gets more claps, it's the song is the topic that we'll talk about. And it was so fun. I mean, people were so engaged, and they were so like
I use an audience response system to do similar things where I create these kind of forks in the road in the presentation where it could go down this way or this way, and I let it be democratically determined live with a pie graph that shows where people want to go, as opposed to like a raising hands. I'm not going to count hands, Yeah, Plus, I have data. I have data afterwards, and I also like it. It's gated, so I can follow up. But I really love that kind of like let's buy-in is the important bit when people talk about attention and how hard it is to gain attention. Really, the difference is buy-in. Even when I talk about curling. How do you get someone to buy into this being exciting or entertaining or whatever? You get the buy-in and you have to look at all the different ingredients and you're like, the ingredients, they're not that good. Like James, if he's listening, you can talk about British food, right? It's not, none of the ingredients are that exciting, right? But there is something when someone has maybe bangers and mash that brings them back to childhood that they would love it for that reason. But basically it's a sausage and a potato. It's not, the ingredients aren't that exciting. But that's okay. That's what you have to work with. What is exciting is, and people do the same thing with virtual events. Like, well, it's just a screen and people talking. Like, yeah, but what about the time that you cried while watching, this movie where the dog dies at the end? Like, how did you get to that point? And that was a screen too, And so you have to really stop everything and say, what if? What could be?
Yeah, and now that we are
yes. I'm sorry to interrupt, but actually we've run out of time. And Nick, in 2 minutes.
Common for me.
What would be your very practical advice for our viewers to how to launch themselves with design thinking for their events?
Yeah. So design thinking, the steps again are empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. I would start at the beginning and I would develop your empathy skills. There's an idea we have here, which may or may not get more traction moving forward, called the ride along, where someone, if they want to, they can ride along with a police officer and they can see their day. Journalists do this quite a bit. I would say take that with your community and do a ride along with them. If you serve a dental association and you're in the association itself, go to a dentist office and work with them for the day. Hear what they say in the break room. Be immersed in the nuances of who they are, and that it could be social listening, it could be physically together. Find these living personas out there. Create things like advisory boards. Surround yourself with the diversity and the community that you serve. So that's the first place I would start. And then I would start truly empowering outside voices within your group. People who are on the front line. If you're developing software, you need to have someone who is in all points of the lowest level needs to be part in there. It doesn't matter, anything. You need wild cards. You need someone from another industry potentially in your group. I've had hackathons where we've brought for event design, and I've brought architects in there because they create shapes for people to experience things. So while it's totally different, there's also a bridge. So having that kind of outsiders in there and truly empowering them to ask, why do you do it that way? That's crazy. Where everyone else is just so used to saying the same words. And then a little game I do sometimes, it's fun, is you have to start with a question, a big swing for the fences idea. How might we do something really big? And then immediately following, someone has to shoot it down, poke holes in it, tear it apart. And then someone has to shoot holes in the person who shot the holes and say, no, we can do this. We can overcome that. Get into that rhythm of big idea, tear it apart, tear apart the tearing apart, and see what it becomes. Because what we've never done really well in the events industry, and the reason that you see this word so much, is the idea of pivot. We see events as we had a good event or we had a bad event. It failed its idea. If you have prototypes and tests, there's no failing. Every event is a great event if you learn from it and you listen and you pay attention and you gain ground by building upon that foundation.
Well, Nick, that was a very insightful conversation. We thank you again so much for being with us today, sharing this moment. Just to remind our viewers, so you can discover Nick's work and follow him on his website, nickborelli.com. And Nick is also a very popular Instagrammer, so at nick.borelli in Instagram. So make sure you follow him. And Nick, thank you very much. So following on,
appreciate it.
We've prepared something very special for all of you. And as I said in the introduction, online events are a great place for experimentation and innovation. We can come up with cultural and entertainment ideas that will inspire our attendees. And that's what we've thought about doing for this get-together. So we've come up with a very interesting musical experience, and we invited Dorina Gabrielita. Dorina is an experienced violin teacher and performer, both in chamber and symphony orchestras. And she's participated in countless concerts all around the world. She's led by her desire to travel, to discover. She's worked in Japan, in Italy, and now Dorina is based in the beautiful island of Tenerife in Spain. From she'll be delighting us with some incredible music. So Dorina, the virtual stage is all yours.
Wow, okay, that was something incredible. I have shivers. This is what you don't get during a webinar. This is why online events rock. So let's have this clear. So we'll be interviewing Dorina shortly, but until then, I wanted to let you know that you can follow Dorina on Instagram. You can see her handle on the screen. She's publishing there other collaborations she has with other musicians, each one from their homes. And also you can find her website in case you want to have her at your online event. So, hi, Dorina, how are you?
Hi, thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure for me to be here and to share this experience with you.
Thank you so much, Dorina. We really enjoyed it.
It's a pleasure for us. So let's kick off this interview. We know that you are working closely with the events industry, providing your services as a violinist and designing musical experiences for the attendees. And having this in mind, could you tell us how this crisis affected the events industry in Tenerife?
Well, we was very affected as everywhere, but Tenerife especially is living only from tourism and mostly from events. And of course, suddenly one day everything was cancelled. I had around 50 performances a month and sometimes 3-4 performances a day. So in one moment, everything was stopped. It was a really strange feeling, but the crisis affected me more than I could imagine. Suddenly I had time and I felt like a lot of opportunities opened in front of me. I had no income, but I'm sure that this is a good lesson for all of us. And thanks God, I paid only money for these lessons because I'm really sorry for the people and families that had lost their relatives or friends during this time. So anyway, if I already had to pay for a lesson, I like to take and to learn from it as much as I can. So here is where I start to review all my communications and to create new products and to do new collaborations.
And Dorina, just exactly, so you didn't stop playing during this period of crisis, but actually we discovered you playing online and collaborating with other musicians. Tell us about it. What have you been up to online during these last 3 months?
Yes, I expressed myself through music, and I really believe that music has a strong impact in our lives. It's very powerful because it can change our state of mind. So especially in this time, I couldn't stop playing. And we was using before Skype for audience or social media, but we never used the power of internet like we never explored it. And now we start to make collaboration with DJ. We start to play together. Suddenly some of their friends or musicians saw it and they say, oh, I want to play with you together. And we start to make more collaboration with people from United States, with people from different places, and we could make collaboration with no borders, no limits, and it was an amazing experience. Yes.
Marina, what's also amazing is that I never thought that an online live musical experience can be so energetic and so exciting and inspiring. I mean, usually you get these feelings while you are attending, as an attendee, a physical event, and you can see the performer, the musician playing. But with you, you manage to communicate all of this energy and make us feel excited and inspired. I mean, what's your secret? How can one deliver a powerful cultural experience during an online event?
Thank you. Well, first of all, I love what I do, and I think I don't play for all the people. I play for each one. I don't know how many people now are listening me, and honestly, I don't really care if it's 500 or more or less. I play each one of you, and I really love what I do, and I do my best in each moment. So that's it. This is the only secret, I think.
Verena, that's great. So we're seeing more and more online events like this going on and offering online cultural and entertainment experiences. What do you think about it? And do you think this is a trend that will develop in the future?
I honestly believe that the physical events will continue to be, because yes, you can change energy, and it's not only for that. We all like to go out to communicate. We say I dress for myself, but I like if somebody else can see how I dress for myself. No, so I think that all these kind of physical events, they will be. But I noticed, especially in this time, playing and collaborating and making recordings and making different works online and making online events, I noticed a very big benefits of online events. First of all, I'm speaking from my point of view as a musician. The people, they can listen what I'm doing, because they are different type of events. And many times I had complaints like, oh, I like your music, but I could not really enjoy it because it was so noisy, or because you are staying too close to the speaker and you see too loud, you can hear too loud everything. If you go too far away, you cannot. So lots of technical things, let's say. But
the
event, it's a live event, it's a physical one, so you cannot control all these details like it's happening. Another thing that is very important for me is that, okay, I cannot see you, but we can communicate. And this opportunity is giving me only the online event, because each one of you can write me something. Can say, I like this, I don't like this, I feel this when I hear you, or I think about that, or could you please make this song? So in this way, I can communicate with the listeners, with the people that are listening to me. And in a physical event, this is not possible, because some guests, they can get closer to you, they can say you hi, but usually it's not happening, or it's happening very fast. Each one is in his own things in that moment. Mm-hmm. So I think the online events is giving us more opportunity to get in touch with each other, to communicate, and to hear our listener. It's not me playing for you there. No, I'm here, but I also can listen to you, and I can have an interaction with my listeners more than we can imagine. Mm-hmm. And I think it's very important for both of us. And another thing that I really like in online events is that in physical events, I see after the event a lot of garbage, sorry, but a lot of plastic, a lot of waste, a lot of food that we have to throw away. And I always look at this like from one side, what a good party, and from another side, like what animals we are. I'm sorry, but it's like this from one side. I like physical events, and I will go and I will play and I will be present. But every time and especially in this moment when we have to be more conscious, more to realize that we need to take care more about our planet, about our Earth, to don't use what is not necessary. So I think online event, it's also a way to don't waste things and that are not necessary to do it. And to be more responsible in our work, in our way of doing things.
Yeah, definitely. Online events are much more sustainable. And one last question we have, like, okay, now companies and brands will start planning more events, more online events, and obviously they will realize that they have the possibility to provide this cultural entertainment experience to their attendees, that they won't have only the speakers talking, but also there will be moments like we had with you. So could you tell us what would be some of your recommendations for these companies? I mean, after all, our audience is based on event planners and marketers, and maybe they could go away with something practical, and we would like to know what your recommendations are.
Well, first of all, a very, very big benefit of online events is the global listeners, audition that we can have. Here is a plus, and a little bit complicated because how the people are all around the world. They are very different. It's not so easy already to know how to get to each one. And so that's why it's very important. I really believe that the people will remember how you make them feel. Mm-hmm. So as we cannot know from how many countries will have people listening tonight or today, which kind of people, which ages, more or less we can guess because of a subject. But anyway, it's an open event, and this is amazing that we can get to so many people. But in the same time, we don't know how to manage each one. So I think that's why it's so important to know how we want to make them feel. And here is where it's coming this like to make dynamic the event. To don't make like speech or presentation. No, we need to be creative. This is where it's coming the design thinking.
Yes, sure.
The creativity of each one, the personality of each one. Here is why the same product can be different, like can have a different presentation for the people, because it's how and what I want to send to the people and how I want to make they feel what I use. I use music, I can use different skills or anything. And I think this is very important. And another important question is not only why I'm doing this, is for what I'm doing this. Like, for what I'm doing this. I do this because this. So when you have all these things in your mind, you design the things like you spoke before, and it's very important. So this is, I think, it's the most important thing. Of course, a good equipment and the technical support. This is this
goes without saying. It's important.
Yes, and for me, a very important is to be grateful to the people that they are giving us their time and their attention. So thank you very much. Because thanks to all the people that they are listening us, we can do events, we can keep going. And always before I start to do something, I think about that people that can make many things in this moment, anything else, but they choose to give us this time. So that's why I try to do my best, or I think that each company, each person thinking about this, they will do the best of themselves and to make a good content.
It's a content.
Yes, for respect for the people that they're giving us their time and their attention. Yes.
Absolutely. Thanks to everyone, and we have to be grateful for their attention, for spending this time with us. Dorina, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
You're a very much musician. Thanks for you're spending this with us and sharing your insights about online events and our industry. Have a great summer in Tenerife. And thanks to everybody who was here today. It was a great experience for us in Eventtia. And this is definitely just the first chapter of many events to come. So thanks to everybody, and we hope to see you soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.